Hello, welcome to another episode of Daniel Lee Plastering and Rendering. Today we were taking you through a journey of renovating this lovely bedroom. So we've already plasterboarded the ceiling in another video. Feel free to check out the YouTube channel to see that one. We're going to skip forward a little bit now and we're going to start straight with a bit of a time lapse on getting the ceiling plastered. So once the room has been plasterboarded, we like to start with the ceiling. So we'll always start with the ceilings, mostly from a messy point of view. If you do the walls first, you can, but then when you do the ceiling, you inevitably get splashes of plaster on the walls, and it's just a bit of a pain. We're pretty clean, but it's just a good habit. So we start at the top, work our way down. So when we've got a room to fully plaster, always start with the ceiling.
You can see on this one, it's got two very small sections of ceiling at a slight angle. We call them skeelings in the industry. Whether or not that's their technical name or not, certainly what we call them. And I'm getting them done first because they are going to be connected with a little curve to the main ceiling. Some people have even connected them to the walls as well, but most people like a straight line, just so there's a clear separation between the ceiling and the walls, a nice sharp edge for painting. So in this instance, there is a bit of a gap there, so you can see I'm filling it out, but we are not doing the walls. We are going to get those skeelings on. They can be a little bit faffy and a little bit time consuming. You can see it's just a tiny bit too small for my trowel, but I can get around it. And then once we've got the skeelings on, right now, although there will be a slight curve, I'm just going to do them. I've just put them on flat for now, you'll notice. And now we're on the ceiling. Again, always plaster left to right if you're right-handed. Pick a corner. I'm starting there. I've got a little bit of a lump in the gear there. I work nice and methodically, left to right, and I've got my lovely stilts on, which really help reduce the wear and tear on the body. A little bit less up and down, which is always nice. I also think you can get a bigger area on stilts, or at least perhaps with a minimum effort, in my opinion at least. You find a nice trail stroke for me. You can do about 1.5 meters or maybe 1.2 meters, depending on your arm length. But it's difficult to see. That's probably just under 1.5 meters, that stride there. There's a strip of plasterboard at the end and then one full board. So this is it's actually a decent sized room, this one. It's probably about, I believe it's about 4 meters by 4.5 meters square. So it's a decent size. And then when you throw in those skeelings, they do add a little bit of they do add a bit of complexity, a bit of time. So it's not quite as straightforward as if it was just one easy ceiling. There are only a couple of wires in this ceiling. The rest of them, this ceiling's actually got a lot of spotlights. So quite often when a ceiling's got spotlights, they tend to be put into the ceiling. So the electrician or whoever's putting them in has a lovely crisp ceiling to put his new circular lights in. That helps ensure that there's plaster all around the edge beautifully. It's a lot easier, in my experience, to do it that way round. So what I've found, when the holes are cut out in the plasterboard before it's been plastered, the actual holes for the downlighters are a little bit weaker. So if you plaster the ceiling first, you're adding strength and rigidity to that ceiling and in turn that hole. So then when the electrician cuts his circular hole out of that ceiling and presses in his light fitting, which has two sharp metal brackets normally that pincer through, it will have a very nice tight snug fit. Whereas sometimes if they do it into the plasterboard, the plasterboard's softer without having that final coat of plaster over the top, and it can be a bit crumbly around the edge. And that can weaken the downlighter hole. So I would always recommend plastering the ceiling first before cutting the holes. You can do it the other way around, but in my opinion, it's a better result this way. The last thing you want is those beautiful brand new downlighters going into your brand new ceiling and then not sitting nice and flush with the ceiling. Have you ever seen a spotlight that's just sagging off the ceiling a little bit? Well, it could well be the reason is that the holes were cut in the plasterboard. But anyway, I digress. So back onto the ceiling, you can see I've got a speed skim there, which is I believe that's a refiner brand. There is also there's many brands. Ox is another one. My brother has a Ox and I think I have a refiner. In my opinion, I can't really tell the difference. They're both great, really, really handy. So you'll see now I'm using it to flatten the ceiling and also using it to do an ever so tight curve. This is a very old house, beautiful house, really, really well maintained, but it is an old house and it does have the quirky wobbles of an old house. So it's not perfectly straight, perfectly flat, but this really helps straighten it as much as sort of realistically possible, and certainly straight enough to the eye. And that, rather than using a 14-inch steel trowel, the 4-foot speed skim is a little bit more forgiving than a rigid steel straight edge. So it will follow the curves a little bit, but while also flattening and straightening it out. So I quite like this method for doing the curves. You can use your steel trowels. Some people like using flexible trowels, which, nothing wrong with that. You can also use bonding coat to build out these curves first, which we've done many times ourselves. Excuse me. But the issue with that, which some people love, but in this instance we wanted a nice tight curve. So when you use bonding coat, which is an undercoat plaster, you can use that just on the curve to build out and create a lovely soft curve, but it tends to be a much thicker curve. And in this particular instance, we were after a sort of sharper curve rather than a big, soft, large curve. But some people, if they want a nice big large curve, almost making it look like the scaling is a sort of a cornice, then you can certainly build that out with bonding first. In fact, anything thicker than a sort of tight curve, I would actually recommend using an undercoat plaster. But as this is only quite a thin, nice sort of sharp curve, it's perfectly fine to do with the multi-finish plaster. So once I've done the skeelings, I will then go, from one end of the wall to the other. This is basically a flatten now. Speed skim is like a 4-foot trowel. It's convenient. You can get them in 6 feet as well. I find the 6-foot one a little bit cumbersome and a bit awkward, although it probably worked well on this ceiling. A lot of our ceilings have wires in and all sorts, and the 6-foot one can be, it's got its uses on large ceilings, but the 4-foot one is absolutely fine for this one. I find you can get nice amount of pressure. You want to remember to keep the speed skim nice and at the angle nice and tight to the ceiling. If you notice, I'm hardly taking anything off the ceiling. You really do not want to be removing much of the plaster off the ceiling. All you're simply doing is pressing it in and flattening it. You're taking out some of the lines to make the next stage easier. So do bear that in mind. Obviously you do get some off, which I then scrape off and wash off. But that's a handy tip. Keep the speed skim nice and clean as well, that'll help. And that is had a dry trowel. Skip forward quite a bit there. Missed the messy middle in that one. but that's gone very well, very nice. That's had a flatten, 2 wet trowels, 2 dry trowels, and that's there. And now we're back the next day. So we're going to focus on the walls now. You'll notice that's the ceiling a day later. Suddenly it looks a lot darker and patchier as it dries, completely normal, nothing to worry about at all. You can see we've used the actual render mesh there to strengthen that wall. I'll discuss that more in a moment. But there's some significant cracks in this wall, but it is quite solid on the whole, so this was a good method. So we've got the first coat on. So because this is reinforcement mesh in here, technically it's actually on this one I've used render mesh, which works absolutely brilliantly. Nothing wrong with that at all. You can use thinner scrim, so what it will mean is I've got to put the wall on thicker. And to get over this, you can see I've just given it a speed skim, but if I go close, you can see the grid pattern just sort of bleeding through there a bit. Very similar to like going over Artex. All you have to do is just let it go off a little bit more, let this coat really firm up before applying the next coat. That will help control that. So we'll give this another 10-15 minutes and then reassess. Although just there where the light's shining, we need a bit less. Let's get in the water. Good job.
My favourite job.
Yes, we do have to trek outside for this one, don't we? It's fine. This has now had its second coat, and you can see clearly that pattern is now completely gone. So there's no mesh showing through there at all. It's literally just been applied, so obviously it's still lots of trowel lines. We will let this firm up and then give it a flatten. It's had its first flatten. Coming up quite nicely, no mesh whatsoever visible now, which is lovely. Ethan keeping his strength up.
Recovery is important in this line of work.
The phone's probably not the best message.
Cashews also help.
This has just had a good dry trowel. You can see there, that wall now is not only fully meshed, because it was a bit of a cracked one, but that also enhances the impact, or increases the impact resistance. So that is one way to make a wall much stronger as well. See also there, they've come on nicely. That just wants one more polish. That's coming on nicely there. Looking good. Yeah, almost done here. See there, it's looking very, very nice. And that final set is now finished. And you can see what I mean about how lovely and smooth it looks. I mean, it's all smooth, but compared to the ceiling, it's all patchy. But it is some dusty work. So we are just got to get the tidy up. And dust ourselves off there first. This is one lovely finished room. Well, I hope you found this useful and helpful. Any questions at all, I love to get comments and answer them. So do drop me a line. Subscribe if you want more information, more videos, tips on plastering, and any help on rendering as well. We cover almost all of it. And thank you all very much for watching. Have a great day.